All right, so let's go ahead and get started with a word of prayer, and we will see where we go today. Dear Father, Lord, we thank you for a chance to continue to journey together and search and try to understand the principles of your word, the mysteries that we can apply to our walks with you, and including in our walks of health. And so, Lord, we ask for your guidance and leading as we look at how a functional medicine approach can apply to specifically thyroid, and also lessons from how you lead us to challenges. And we ask you for your spirit's leading and guidance. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so today I wanted to continue some of what Nellie brought up last time, the topic. So hopefully you'll see everything here. Are we good? Does everybody see?
Yes.
Very good. All right. So last week we began looking at this topic, or this verse, and so different contexts, and I wanted to take some time and just explore it and explore some of the backstories and side stories, and look at some questions that I found fascinating around the whole question of the oops, I guess that turned things off. Let me not press that button. Around the Exodus, and so explore some maps and see, okay, what is the actual, what are some of the possibilities of how the Exodus worked, but then find spiritual applications for the stories as well. So Exodus 14 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. So we have some names, and we certainly have a important story. So we're looking at how the Lord humbles us, and some versions say causes us to hunger, that he might feed us. In this case, he is causing them to be shut in, purposely leading them into a trap. So I don't know if you've ever wondered how the journey to Sinai worked. Have you ever wondered that? No? All right.
No.
If you ever look at, there's actually been a huge debate over the years over where exactly they went. And the traditional route is this one here, and it goes, and they have this Mount Sinai, supposedly, in southern Sinai, that's basically still in Egypt. And it's, my dad had climbed up to it and almost fell off the other side when he was playing hide and seek on the top of it. But it is missing a number of details. One of the first questions that comes up when looking at this map is there's an important detail that seems a little confusing. Can anyone guess what would be missing? If this is Sinai, I'll put my cursor down here. If this is Sinai, what would be missing on the way to Sinai, or it seem a little hard to understand?
Sea.
Red Sea, yeah. Where is the Red Sea? Well, I didn't zoom in, but if you zoom in here, there's this little thing called Lake Timsan. Timson. And supposedly, this lake is the Red Sea. So what would be the problem with that being the Red Sea?
Looks like it'd be pretty easy to avoid.
Yeah, you go right around it. And everybody, if you zoom out on this, I guess you can see it over there. Okay, so everyone knows that the Red Sea is this part down here. It's been called the Red Sea for a long time. Now, there are two bitter lakes. They're called Greater Bitter Lake and Less Bitter Lake, so at least you have something bitter. But there's a lot that one would say. So looking at this made me wonder why, if possibly this was behind, if you've heard the joke about the guy saying, oh, how can you be so happy or believe in God? And he's like saying, well, because God drowned all of the Egyptians in the Red Sea. And it's like, well, didn't you know that was 4 inches deep? And he's like, oh, praise the Lord. Well, God drowned all the Egyptians in 4 inches deep of water. And I didn't do the joke quite right, but it made me think like that maybe this is what they're talking about. Like, if that's the Red Sea, okay, yeah, that's not much of a Red Sea to be afraid of or to count as a miracle. So where is the real route to Egypt to Canaan? We all know that it goes up and down like this, and there's this little circle with an entrance and an exit. If you've ever played Egypt to Canaan, which was my favorite game as a little kid, and that was long hours. We actually played recently with our in-laws, Angie's nephews, and we bought the game for me, and we had a lot of fun playing over Zoom. So Egypt to Canaan, fun game. I recommend it for any kids in the house. So where did they cross the Red Sea? All right, so there's Lake Timsah, little tiny lake, and Bitter Lakes. All right, so there is a bit of debate. There has been a number of people since then that have come up with other theories, which are very interesting to look at. And most of them surround this thing called Jabal al-Lawz in Sinai. The Bible actually, in Arabia, the Bible actually says that Mount Sinai is in Arabia, and this over here is not Arabia. This is not Arabia, even though that's what we can say is Mount Sinai. It says Mount Sinai is in Arabia, which would make a lot of sense because if you look at the whole picture, they come up into Canaan from the east side. So why would they go around here back and then go all the way across over and then come back? So it just makes a lot more sense in a lot of ways. But then there's this question of, okay, there are several competing theories. So I just wanted to quickly walk through them because I found them fascinating and a little bit of geek on these things, I guess. So this northern route was originally proposed by Ron Wyatt, who was an Adventist. He did not have the rest reputation, but he did seem to be the first one pointing to Jabal al-Lawz, and there's more and more people that are thinking Jabal al-Lawz probably has the highest likelihood. Now, when he went, he found this Nuweibi beach. And so if you see right where that red line crosses, there's this Nuweibi beach, which is in the middle of nowhere. It comes out here, and then there is actually a crossing point right across it where it is shallow, and you can cross over like up here, up north, farther north. So you kind of cross over and then go up in here, and then you go on over. And so that has been, by a lot of people, they consider Nuweibi Beach to be a good option. There's some interesting things about that. If you look at, there is these columns which are on both sides of the channel, which according to, if I can find that slide, according to Ron Wyatt, at least, in his group, did I delete the one? Okay. Has Phoenician letters on it. Oh, here we go. That say, like most of it has been rubbed off, but they say that some you can make out like Mizraim, which is Egypt, Solomon, Edom, Death, Pharaoh, Moses, Yahweh. And so they say that these were set up by King Solomon as columns to memorialize the miracle of the crossing of the sea. So it looks like Saudi Arabia might have removed one of these columns. So, but at one point there were columns on both sides, is what they said. So there's some other interesting things. And welcome, Nellie. I assume you're jumping in from your other group. Oh, there you are. Welcome. I assume you're jumping in from your other group.
Yes, yes.
Glad to have you.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
So yes, so we are somewhat geeking out, as I'm somewhat of a biblical geek, on looking again at the story of that you kind of brought up and drawing spiritual lessons, but also looking at a question that's interesting to me of where exactly was the crossing of the Red Sea. And so that's kind of where we are right now, is a quick side line into these possibilities. So just to back up, there's the original route, which, like there's problems with, like, how do you drown a whole army in Lake Timnah? That's the original supposedly crossing the Red Sea. First, it's not the Red Sea. One, they can just go around it. It's not that deep. It's got tons of problems. Okay, there's a bitter lake, but and this Mount Sinai, yeah, where's a real Red Sea to cross to it? So there's a number of problems with the original commonly told map to this Mount Sinai. And so there have been other people that have made two competing stories. And one of them was originally created by Ron Riot, who is an Adventist, who did not have a good reputation. He was a kind of a archaeologist that was wandering around finding all these different theories of a lot of different things, but he did find some interesting stuff. And in this one, there was a number of things. We had chariot's wheels in the water out there that were kind of buried, and here's some more pictures of those. Yeah, and supposedly the Arabian Navy talks about how they can look down and sometimes they can see these chariot wheels, and I'm like, okay, well, that's you can find a bunch of pictures all claiming to be chariot wheels in this area, specifically just off to that side. I'm not sure why off to that side, but maybe it's interesting. And then you've got, which actually might explain something to me, but okay, I have a question later, maybe that'll help. And then there's these columns we were talking about on both sides. There's a fort, which could be the Weba. What is it? Weba? I thought it had the label, and I'll also find it again. There's a name for something that's mentioned in the Bible that would be on one side. And then this Pi-Haroth, which is the opening of the waters, is what that means, I believe, in another thing we'll find. So that's one competing theory. And then they crossed over to the other side over here. And it's shallow there, so they would go up farther north up here. They would have crossed over, and then they would have continued on there. So competing theory number one, and then they would have come in via this wadi, and you can see again here. So they would have traveled in here. So the Egyptian army would have started kind of wading in. They would, oh, okay, sorry, you're right. They would travel in here. The Egyptian army would have come in here and kind of followed them in. And so then they would have had their moment of, oh no, we're doomed, either possibly out here and running in afterwards, or they're in here and then they're stuck. Now, this is a map of somebody that says, no, there's problems, you can escape. I don't know if that's totally clear. I mean, it's not the best escape, but okay, maybe there's ways of escape. But he's not convinced of this theory. So this guy, who's put a lot of work and has some really good maps, has some very interesting theories. I think the Bible specifically calls part of the thing the way of the sea, by way of the sea. And I tried to look that up when that's used, but that might go along with the southern route. He talks about these slave mines where the Hebrew slaves would have been, and they could have picked them up along the way. And then there is this Migdol, this watchtower down here, and that could be Migdol. And okay, maybe Pi-Haroth, the three-way mouth of the water, which would have probably fit with the other picture as well. Could be this bottom part here, three ways of water, I guess. And then then they would have come around the bottom of this peninsula, and they would have run to these mountains, and that's what would have shut them in. And so that would have been, for his count, day 16. Although, so I have some interesting questions which come up when we bring up some all in light things and ask, okay, how does that tie in? So they get here, and either way, they have this journey and they get caught, which goes back to where we are headed. So we read the verse that God led them into the wilderness. He caused them to hunger, and then he fed them with manna, which they did not know, that we might know that man does not live by bread alone. So you are an Israelite, you're here, or you're in the other picture, one of the two, or you're here, and you see Mr. Pharaoh coming after you, and you immediately remember all the things that God has done for you, and you are for sure confident or not. Would someone be willing to read this for us?
When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness."
All right, so the Hebrews were encamped beside the sea, whose waters represented a seemingly impassable barrier before them. While on the south, which is interesting. Okay, this is Patriarchs and Prophets, all in white. So it brings up questions of inspiration and her understanding and where her understanding comes from. But while on the south, a rugged mountain obstructed their further progress. Okay, I don't know what to do with that, with what these two theories or any of the three theories. The only thing I could think of is, okay, there's mountains if you get stuck on this side, and supposedly on that side is where they saw the Pharaoh's chariots. I don't know. So anyways, keep reading. A rugged mountain obstructed their further progress. Suddenly, they beheld in the distance the flashing armor and moving chariots. So that sounds more like the opposite, in the distance, the other picture. And moving chariots betokening the advance guard of a great army. As the force drew nearer, the hosts of Egypt were seen in full pursuit. Terror filled the hearts of Israel. Some cried unto the Lord, but the far greater part hastened to Moses with the complaints. Because there was no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? So, either way, we're stuck. And who is it that sent us here? Before this time, we have the pillar of cloud. It would be nice to have a picture of that was specifically already leading them, and specifically led them to this track. All right. Why does God lead us into tough spaces? So, I get this just right here. Then Moses obeys God's command and provides deliverance. And they see an example of God providing when they have no answers, when in a way that there was no option for them, there was no. And I guess I just want to, I mean, as we explore this and this kind of the map things as well, I wanted to just ask, how do we get to a place where we can go to where we are shut in, where there's no options for us, and yet we know that God led us, and we can calmly, peacefully say, okay, Lord, this is going to be interesting what you're going to do next. And trust and have the faith of Moses. What leads us there, and what prevents us. So,
Can I say, oh,
yes, go for it,
am I allowed to speak? Oh,
please.
sorry. I was just thinking of a little bit about the pastor's sermon today, and how he had mentioned that how sometimes, especially with the children of Israel, he had to, because of their disobedience, he would have to pull back on his protection and watch care. And maybe I'm kind of mixing it up, but I'm, I would, and if I recall, I think with the children of Israel, there was a lot that they had to unlearn after leaving Egypt. And that could be, a reason why they were put into such a predicament. They had to be reminded that God is their protector, and that, it's not, they cannot do anything in their own strength. Even all along the way, and even before they left, they saw all these miracles of God. So it's a hard-headed group of people, but yeah.
Yeah, which I think is probably the clear lesson, no matter what one puts together of the map, that God very clearly led them into challenges. I mean, there's nothing in Arabia and Midian, and there's nothing, no matter where you put these things, they had to depend upon God, and he could have sent them the easy way, direct route to Jerusalem, to all these things, and instead, so does God do that in our lives, and how and why, and how do we learn? And so thank you. So they look behind them and they see the answer to their prayers, their enemies who they feared for years away, destroyed, and now they're going to trust God no matter where he takes them. So, so in this story, this map, which is very well done, they travel 50 kilometers and they come to what could be Mara. It is this little lake here, which is bitter. I don't know if it's quite as convincing as some of the others, but it is an option. And they have trouble again. So Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went to the wilderness of Shur. So different maps show different places of Shur. We'll look at some more in a second. They went through 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. So 3 days walking in the hot sun, no water. They're thirsty. Their cattle are thirsty. Their kids are crying out. When they came to Mara, they could not drink the water of Mara because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Mara. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? So if you're Moses, what are you thinking? Now, Moses actually lived here before. So where's that map here? So, okay, this is the other option of Mara. So, okay, you cross there, and then here could be Mara, and there's a good candidate for Elam. Either way, the caves of Jericho are pretty well known to be down here in Jethro, just south, caves of Jethro. Everybody knows, let's see if I can get that picture up. Everybody knows that Midian is down here. Okay, even the original pictures labeled Midian down here. That is where Jethro's from. Huh? Oh, sorry, my arrow. Midian's down here. That is where Jethro is from. Why would Jethro be having Moses take his flocks over to the other side of the peninsula and going over here? Why would they went there? They met up with Jethro. They went to a place where Moses used to lead his flocks. It just makes much more sense to be on that side of the water. So one way or another, that there's good reasons to think that that is what is going on. So Moses had been here before, and he knew what was going to happen. But for 3 days, as they journeyed, they could find no water. The supply which they had taken with them was exhausted. There was nothing to quench their burning thirst. As they dragged wearily over the sunburnt plains, Moses was familiar with this region, knew what the others did not. That at Mara, the nearest station where springs were to be found, the water was unfit for use. With intense, now this is interesting, like just the way she puts it. Here he knows, and he's like watching the cloud, like, okay, Lord, where are you taking us? Where are you taking us? With intense anxiety, he watched the guiding cloud, and with a sinking heart, he heard the glad shout, water, water, echoed along the line. Men, women, and children in joyous haste crowded to the fountain, when lo, a cry of anguish burst forth from the host. The water was bitter. So what do we do when God leads us through a desert, leaves us parched, we're out of water, and we come to a place and the water's bad? What do we do? So he caused, some translations say, you to hunger, thirst, whatever else might be in our lives, so that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread, water, or whatever else alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. In horror and despair, they reproached Moses for having led them in such a way, not remembering that the divine presence in that mysterious cloud had been leading him as well as them. In his grief at their distress, Moses did what they had forgotten to do. He cried earnestly to God for help, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he cast in the waters were made sweet. So then he leads them. He leads them on to the next place, which so he takes care of them there at Mara, and then leads them forward, and they come to Elim. Now, this is one candidate. The other candidate is over here. And both of them look. Well, there's actually sounds like there's three options, maybe. But I'll show you the two that are the most common here. Both of them kind of look similar. They're little oases with palm trees. And so this is the one up north that was Ron Wyatt's idea. And this is the one down south, which is this other guy's idea. Both of them have these palm trees, and you know would fit the story. There's an interesting place which is called the 12 Springs of Moses, which would be right about the right place for Elim. Here, the Muslims actually call it that. You can go there, you can get it. It's a tourist place. You go there, and supposedly they say that the water is miraculous because it runs uphill, because it shouldn't be there. And so I don't know what to make of that, but that's what they said on the official Arabian, or what said was an official Arabian tourist thing. So they set out for Elim, and all the congregations of the people came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they departed from the land of Egypt. Then at some point here, they have a second camp by the sea, which I think you can get from both journeys, which is interesting, but doesn't really solve the question. So then comes another challenge. So when they had been a month absent from Egypt, so now they've been a month absent from Egypt, which is interesting, they made their first encampment in the wilderness. Their store of provisions now began to fail. There was scant herbage in the wilderness, and their flocks were diminished. How was food be supplied for these vast multitudes? So again, here you are in the wilderness. Your flocks you're having to eat your flocks, right? You've run out of food. There's no vegetables. There's no herbs, nothing green to look at. You've got milk. How many? There was lots of people. Different estimates go different sizes, but it was a huge group of people. So now you're eating up your flocks to stay alive. What do you do? And the whole congregation of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the land of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly. They had not as yet suffered from hunger. Their present wants were supplied, but they feared for the future. They could not understand how these vast multitudes were subsist in their travels throughout the wilderness. In imagination, they saw their children famishing. And I think that's the story that you kind of see repeatedly. And I think you can see it in our lives as well, as we come to challenges where we're like, okay, Lord, what are you going to do next? We rarely have any real suffering. Our wants are supplied, but we fear and we don't know. There's one last picture here that I find interesting. If you look it up, this thing's a place called the Split Rock, which is right here on the way to Mount Sinai. It's right with that red dot here, Rephidim. That's that one there. There's different options for Rephidim, but this one looks like there's water where it could be, water. There's actually a place on the side of the hill that looks like it had water flowing there at one point, and would fit the story. And it's right next to Jebel Allah's, which has a burnt black top. The whole mountain on top has a black top. There are 12 pillars around. There's a stone place that could easily be a place where there's sacrifices. There's a whole bunch of things there at Jebel Allah's that just would make a lot of sense. And so it's very interesting. So that is the end of my exploration into maps of the Exodus. And yeah, I wanted to take a little bit of time and just explore both that and also the question of how do we have when God guides us through the wilderness, through our own challenges, how do we look at it as an opportunity for him to demonstrate his faithfulness and his care so that he can, when we do get to the borders of the promised land, we can trust him and not depend upon our own strength or run back in fear. Any comments or thoughts before we move on? We got some comments here. I would not survive. I would have had a hard time too. Your move, God. Yeah, basically.
I just want to say, when you were talking about, the wilderness, I mean, they really had to rely on God for everything, food, water, shelter. I mean, they're literally in the wilderness. They have nowhere to hide. I mean, walking around, it's not like they had GPS. I mean, I get lost even with GPS. That's why I'm saying I would not survive on the food and walking around. Like that would not work for me. I'm glad I wasn't there. So, no, but my point is we can apply that same logic in our lives today because, God puts us in a wilderness season, to kind of train us trusting him, and to train our faith to believe something that we don't know for sure is coming, that, we don't have anything but the promise of God, and we have no idea how, and we have no idea when, or why even, but we just trust him. And often this kind of training happens in the wilderness. And then you go through your trauma, you go through your fears, you go through all of this, and God just washes us, with his word, just trains us to do that. And through these things, and it's not just empty faith, right? Like when they asked for water was provided. When they asked for food was provided, right? So he's trusting that if you ask, I will provide. You don't need to try to figure this out on your own. And oftentimes when we try to do that, we get into trouble. So I think that still applies today to us.
Amen. Any other thoughts? Well, on that journey, on that theme, I think it applies as well, is part of what this was kind of one of the passages that I found that went with kind of the inspiration behind what I hoped for this group, was how when we have health issues, we can feel like we're stuck. And if we come together and support each other and seek God together, then God can guide us in multiple ways. It says, many are in obscurity, they have lost their bearings, they know not what course to pursue. And then sets out a specific suggestions, which is what I hope we can do in this group, is let the perplexed ones search out others who are in perplexity and speak to them words of hope and encouragement. When they begin to do this work, the light of heaven will reveal to them the path that they should follow. By their words of consolation to the afflicted, they themselves will be consoled. By helping others, they themselves will be helped out of their difficulties. So I pray that's what we can learn to do as a group. All right, so today we are going to look at thyroid. So we are on key number 2, balancing hormones, and specifically looking at a functional medicine approach to healing the thyroid. Nellie did a great job last week of laying out a good overview and summary of thyroid health. And I wanted to spend some time looking at some of the functional medicine approaches that I have run into. I did my best to do the research. I didn't have as much time as I would have liked, but I'm going to try to give as good a summary here as I can. So, functional medicine. One second, let me just fix something here. Functional medicine is a, there we are. Oh. Functional medicine is an approach that has some key differences. Just to again look at what functional medicine is, it's as opposed to conventional medicine where the focus is mostly symptoms. Conventional medicine tends to look for a disease, like look for a diagnosis and label a disease, and then specifically treat, often via specialization, specific organ systems, commonly via medicine or surgery, rarely from a more natural, holistic. There's some components which will include lifestyle medicine and things like that, which are coming more that direction. But it is definitely from a different angle or lens than functional medicine, which functional medicine looks for and seeks to correct fundamental imbalances. So whereas in the top of this tree, we have all these symptoms, we have these different specializations and organ systems, that's kind of more traditional medicine. And then functional medicine is more these common things that affect all of the systems, whether it be energy, transport, structural integrity, mitochondrial infections, inflammation, all those kinds of things, and as well as some of the more common lifestyle stuff, including exercise, stress, relationships, but some other things that maybe aren't as commonly included, such as environmental pollutants, microorganisms, and things like that. So it is a different approach. And some of the key principles are biochemical individuality, that everybody's different. Everyone's reaction, everyone's cause is different. So you can have the same disease, but different causes. You can have the same cause, but different diseases or different symptoms. And so everyone's, and different ways to help people heal. So everyone is individual for specific biochemical genetic reasons, as well as environmental and other things. And also it's very patient-centered, where you spend lots of time with the patient and lots of time listening and lots of time involving the patient in their healing journey, rather than it just being a doctor-led approach. And it is very body-mind focused. There's very much integration with the health of the mind and a two-way effect of mind to body and body to mind. And this web-like interconnection of organ systems, and kind of this vague vitality is kind of it's called different things. It's called a health or a reserve, vital reserve, a healing reserve, kind of this overall ability for your body to respond when challenged, and that encompasses adrenal health, encompasses how much your immune system's reserved to deal with when challenged, but that as an important element that needs to be recognized and coached up and evaluated. And then also, oh, there we go, promotion of organ metabolic reserve. Okay, so those two are kind of similar. And there's some other things that are different, which we kind of talked about some of them. Let's not go to that. One of the things that led me into functional medicine in the first place was actually looking at Ellen White and looking for principles of, okay, what was her principles of healing? And so this is one of the texts that, to me, pointed that direction very clearly for me, or at least somewhere in that realm. Says, let physicians teach the people that restorative power is not in drugs, but in nature. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from the laws of health. So it seems to me to be teaching to an intelligent understanding and an important analysis of how our body works when trying to understand what might be behind things. In case of sickness, the cause, the intelligent understanding and analysis of the laws, and how each organ systems work. The cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions should be changed, wrong habits corrected. Then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities. That sounds like detoxification, and reestablish right conditions. That sounds like balancing homeostasis, rebalancing homeostasis. So I found them to certainly be worth comparing and finding interesting comparisons between what she says and what I was seeing in functional medicine. Again, here's another description. In my training, which is kind of a functional nutrition approach, there's this idea of the stress cascade, where you don't necessarily know what necessarily causes things or what necessarily the effects are, but you can always recognize that there's a cascade. And so sometimes you just have to go back and look, okay, what could be things that could be starting it, even though you might not be able to track every single cause from this disease. You know, many times people that have that disease also have stress, also have oxidation, high oxidation levels, whatever it is. There's these core fundamentals that you might not be able to prove for this one patient, but can logically have cascaded through. And so helping to find ways to decrease those stressors. And here's some examples of how they can cascade from different systems through the HPA axis and over to thyroid. So thyroid function can be affected through your HPA from all of these things. And we'll actually show in a second some of how that happens. All of these things can affect and be affected by your, HPA is your adrenal axis, your stress response. And all these things can affect what can be called your metabolic reserve. So symptoms may be far removed from the causal factors or stressors found upstream. As we talked about, one condition can have many causes, and one cause can have many conditions. So we're talking about mental health is kind of our big lens and the big picture. And depression can be caused by all 5 of these and many others. And as well, if you have inflammation, it could cause depression. And much of that is based on bio individuality and how it affects different persons. So with kind of these lenses in mind, I want to do a somewhat humble approach to, does it mean we need desserts to reverse stress? Yes, I'm sure that is there's great wisdom going on here. So I'll let you guys share your wisdom. Once you figure it all out, let me know, and then you can share that. Okay. Functional Medicine University's approach to assess the cause of thyroid dysfunction. So here they have 7 different possible causes that can each be looked at. We won't have a chance to go into all of them, but we'll look at some of them as potential contributors to thyroid dysfunction. So the common approach to dealing with thyroid is you go to the doctor, they see some of these symptoms, which we'll get to in a second, and then they say, okay, well, I think you might have low thyroid. They test your thyroid. What do you know? It's low, which it makes sense. It would probably be low. And then they say, oh, well, let's treat the test. And so then they give you thyroid to raise the thyroid levels. You feel better for a while, maybe. And what happens if it happens again? Well, then you repeat the process and you add more thyroid. So that is the traditional approach usually. I think probably it's starting to change, as usually things do. But one of the contributions of functional medicine is asking these questions and saying, okay, yeah, but what is behind that? And tracing these from a scientific approach. Each of these things are backed by, you can do the research, you can find the studies showing each of these contributors. I didn't have time to do all that, so I cannot provide that for you, but I know I have seen these before, and I'll show you at least one or 2 examples. And then the reverse, I don't have diseases that low thyroid causes, even though we could show those, but certainly low thyroid, this one thing causes many different symptoms. And so to that point, I'd like to take a quiz, like us all to take a quiz. And I found this one, I might need to look at this more closely myself. Sarah, if you can count how many of these apply to you. And maybe, do we do half points for some that are questionable? Because one of them I can think of maybe a half point. So if you want to read through that and count how many you think apply to you. If anybody needs me to read them to them, I can, if they're on an audio only. Okay. Anybody have those other number? Does everybody have a chance to do their counting? All right. So, yeah, so I'm above 12. I don't know if anyone else is, but I think I need to look at this more closely. And I did not know that before I took this. I had seen something pointing somewhat that way, but obviously I need to look at it even more closely. So I will be taking some of the things more practical in my life. So functional medicine approach to treating thyroid dysfunction and balancing the HPT, which is hypothalamus pituitary thyroid, which Nellie talked about last week, and HPA, which hypothalamus pituitary, same 2 organs there in the brain and then the lower brain. I guess that's part of the brain, and the adrenals, which is right above the kidneys, axes. So they two do go together. They often interact, which we'll look at. So checklist: nutritional status, gastrointestinal status, adrenal gland status, liver status, immune status, environmental toxin exposure, oxidative stress, medications and thyroid medication. So I'm going to come back to this slide here. Again, I like this approach. I don't have to drill it in, but I think it is ties in similar approach that you're talking about here. In the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. So I find what she's saying very applicable. This is from my FDN training. So I do want to walk through it. I won't go in depth, but they had some interesting things which I will try to pull out of it. There you certainly have a common approach to look and recognize when someone has thyroid issues, and they talk about how the traditional approach is, as we talked about. I'm going to use this slide to talk about what how they describe the rest of it. This is a picture of the pathway of hormone signaling from the brain, which I think is important that many of these things are heavily influenced by our brain, and as we'll see in the next one, stress has a huge effect directly on the hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus is there in your brain listening to everything that goes on in the brain and as well as the body, and then responding. And we'll see some of that. And so certainly a common thing, something to think about is what part is our brain having affected on things. Then you have the signaling of TSH, and each of these signals can be intercepted in different ways and be infected in different ways. So we'll look at some of them. The thyroid stimulating hormone stimulates the thyroid gland directly, which is right on your neck. And then that produces 94% T4, which is thyroxine with 4 iodine molecules, and T3, which only has 3, and T3 is the active one. So when it first gets created, most of it is inactive, and all of it gets needs to get bound, I believe is the correct term. This is thyroxine binding globulin, I believe is the correct term. And so that is an important step which has to happen. If that doesn't happen, then, and we'll look at some things that can prevent that. If that doesn't happen, then we'll have issues. Well, let me just look here. Okay, so or you can have overbinding. Okay, so I guess that's the thing. You can overbind some of this T3. So this binding is good to help shuttle it around, but if it's all bound, then none of it will be free. So when it eventually becomes free for the cell to use, it has to be unbound. So you can have overbinding going on. You can have, then it goes to these different organs and these different parts of the body help activate it. And so your liver activates a good portion, and that can have issues. So different things can prevent the liver from, if it's not functioning well, activating. And the liver could also make excess reverse T3, and many people believe the reverse T3 occupies the receptor sites so that the free T3 cannot get into them and into the cell. And so the reverse T3 gets in the way. And so that is something blocking wise seems to be involved in what reverse T3 does. And so the liver can have a problem there. Now there's also an interesting thing where the cellular use of active T3 can be compromised by elevated cortisol. So we'll see how elevated cortisol plays other roles in blocking this. Elevated cortisol is our stress hormone. Just to jump forward here, we've got adrenals, which we'll come to in a second, and adrenals are our stress. So we have HPT and HPA, and adrenals are created from stress, and specifically a result, a stress, dealing with stress of multiple kinds, including internal stressors. But that cortisol can get in the way of the T3 getting into the body, or into the cells, sorry, as can endotoxins from bacteria. Now, bacteria, bad bacteria is one that comes up in several places, because also in the gut, the 20% in the gut, that conversion can be disrupted when you have bad gut. Bacterial lipocytosis. Okay, that good gut bacteria are required to help convert some of the other forms of inactive T3, TSA, and I may have the slide on that one, to active T3, producing up to 25% of active T3. So there are a number of things. Also, mitochondrial dysfunction can be a problem, as can other metabolic issues and inflammation. So if we say that someone has, hypothyroid, the traditional approach is, that's the diagnosis, whereas an FDN or a functional approach would say, well, there could be many other things, that it's not just idiopathic, it could be many things contributing to that. And so there's some of the ones listed here that we've talked about, including autoimmune, that is core, that is affecting lots of, many people that have hypothyroid have high TPO, which is, I believe that's the full acronym, and maybe more to that acronym, thyroid, pituitary, something, it's an autoimmune, which Hashimoto's, and that is causing a lot of people's hypothyroid conditions. And so we talked about liver and gut and cellular and adrenal. So if we have hypothyroid, we don't just want to stop there and treat it. We want to say what could be behind that. And even if we can't get to a proof, what could we do to decrease the metabolic stressors, potential metabolic stressors, and support the systems in the body. So that is kind of the functional holistic mindset. Here you have the specific, and I've seen different diagrams all showing this in the same, and same types of approaches, where you have the corticotropic hormone, I forget it. The TRH from the hypothalamus is blocking the thyroid stimulating hormone and thus decreasing thyroid. As well as the cortisol itself, both blocking the stimulating hormone and blocking the conversion from T4 to T3, and thus, as well as blocking the uptake of active T3 into the cell, and that's shown there. So there are many ways that stress itself can be contributing to hypothyroid conditions. So always good to look at stress reduction. So here is an Institute of Functional Medicine's slide that is a good summary. Factors that contribute to proper production of thyroid hormones. They have some good nutrients there, which are good to make sure that you have optimum levels of. And there are some good supplements, which I have seen helpful for thyroid issues, including tyrosine there, which is also good for dopamine and norepinephrine. And then, which we talked about earlier, a few seminars back or sessions back. Okay, and then factors that inhibit proper production of thyroid hormones: stress, infection, trauma, radiation, medications, fluoride, which is interesting. So we all have used fluorinated water, so evidently that is an antagonist to iodine. Toxins, pesticides, mercury, cadmium, lead, and celiac disease, which I have. So factors that increase conversion of T4 to reverse T3: stress, trauma, low caloric diet, inflammation, toxins, infections, liver kidney dysfunction, certain medications. And factors that increase conversion of T4 to T3: selenium and zinc. And factors that improve cellular sensitivity to thyroid hormones: vitamin A, exercise, and zinc. So there's some good practical takeaways of what we can do. When looking at things from a long-term perspective of how to analyze and find what might be causing things, this is a diagram that was for doctors, functional medicine doctors, but I thought it was still helpful and understandable. At least some degree we can walk through that. You do your normal medical analysis, and then you start in a going slow, looking for some of these different potential causes, including balancing cortisol and DHEA. That is something that you do when you do an adrenal stress hormone saliva test, for instance, and balancing that. Monitoring with follow-up lab tests, the metabolic temperament graph, that I don't know, the metabolic temperature graph. I think that's how you determine. I know you can use temperature graph to determine whether you have adrenal issues and thyroid issues, which we've looked at before. And then also consider L-carnitine for hyperthyroidism. So if anybody wants to jump in, let me know. I know there's some things in the chat here. Who wants to jump in with their comments?
I just had a question, just about there was that mention on the one slide about the fluoride. And so then if you have a thyroid issue, should then we avoid drinking tap water? Is fluoride in the tap water? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I'm sure you get different opinions from different people. I have heard people say that. I do not have enough knowledge to know. I try not to drink it, but I don't know. Maybe Angie knows if there's more research or anything. I've heard people thinking such.
There's,
Do filters filter out fluoride, or do they just filter out other stuff?
It depends on the filter.
The more expensive the filter, the more stuff it filters out.
These are good questions. Maybe we can look more into them. Someone wants to research them and they can tell us the answer or the evidence they see in a second. All right, so they talk about then looking at GI function. Now, when I went to my FTN community or training portal and looked at their material, they had a whole seminar where this doctor who focuses on a functional approach to healing had done all these kinds of tests, all these kinds of things. And what he found was the most important thing to do was to do a stool test, but specifically for H. pylori. And he shows the things that people who have hypothyroid, even when it's rebalanced, the majority of them have H. pylori-ish levels. And so, many people have H. pylori, but the statistical correlation is very high. And he was saying that many, and you can find, I found some actual papers, published research, and of course, many other websites. I'm talking about people healing their thyroid by eliminating H. pylori. Very interesting. So there's probably many other things that would show up in a GI function stool test that could also have legitimate causative pathways theoretically shown, but that is one that came up and he emphasized. Of course, nutritional status plays a role, and so here's some lab tests that they suggested. The adrenal SI, that's adrenal stress. I believe that's adrenal stress one. Celiac panel, good for many people. Stool analysis, that's GI map, organic acid. So this would be the step by step. You pick which would be the next logical, and you start working on it until you find an answer. And then once you kind of have evidently, I guess it's good to make sure your nutritional deficiencies and antioxidants are good. which I'm not sure I entirely understand why, before you start doing liver detoxification and infrared sauna therapy, which would be interesting to understand why they put that last. But I thought the map was helpful as kind of a big picture approach to how a functional medicine doctor would look at this.
What is an infrared sauna?
So there's many different types of saunas. An infrared sauna specifically uses infrared. It uses these infrared lights, which it's usually a far infrared, if I remember right, is better. So it's the farther side of the infrared spectrum, and I believe that penetrates deeper. It's the one of the sides of the infrared is not as healthy for you, whereas the far infrared, if I remember right, is more deeply penetrating and stimulates the body and stimulates the healing. Like I believe it's similar to some of the stuff that has come out about the amazing benefits of sun therapy, or the sun. I mean, it's not just, vitamin D, it actually goes into your body. And I mean, if you put, something in the center of your brain, there's light that makes it in there. And that actually, it penetrates into your body, can actually helps stimulate a bunch of different things. I remember Angie listening to something that talked about melatonin being created and that helping the mitochondria. And so I don't know if that's similar, but I'm guessing there's some crossover, but I know that's what a lot of people talk about is the infrared saunas are the best way to stimulate detoxification. So when we get to the detoxification module, we could do more on that. Oh, we did some of that, so maybe we can cover it again some other time. Liver detoxification, there's multiple ways to do that. Just again, the two different phases, and then of course the third, bile binding and kidney excretion channel after that, or conveyor belt after the first two, phase 1, phase 2 conveyor belts that have to be working. So, anyways, yes.
Jonathan, I have a question on this slide in particular, because as you were going through it, I was like, wow, this is so in depth. And you were going through how there's so many different aspects of what might not be working. You may have the same symptoms, but the reasons for that, the actual source of what the problem is, may be very different from person to person. So from your experience, what would you say, like, for a person to go through all of this to identify the reason of why they might have an issue, just to identify the reason, not to even fix it, just to find what might be wrong? How long does that normally take?
Well, you see at the top there, 6 to 9 months is a time zone they put there.
Wow.
In my training, okay. So what I'm trained to do is I'm trained to do 5 tests. I'm trained to do the stool analysis, the adrenal test, a food sensitivity test, a leaky gut test, and and one with stress and oxidation. So basically a holistic, so it's like 5 tests. And with that, you get a holistic pattern. And you might not catch everything, but often how the body works is there's enough. I mean, all you have to do is remove enough rocks to get the water overflow to stop overflowing. I mean, your body can deal with so much metabolic, and so you're looking for enough boulders to pull out, and then the body's able to, like, oh, okay, now I can calm down and start healing and start have enough cortisol left to decrease inflammation, have enough immune capacity to stop reacting to the wrong things, that kind of stuff.
How do you decide what is priority over something else?
By with my training, I mean, I believe this is many functional medicine doctors, they'll have you fill out long questionnaires, and so and kind of detailed, and so you spend a lot of time looking at all the different ways. So okay, GI looking, okay, what are the, so let me go back to this slide here. So I have a questionnaire that for each of these sections, has 20 plus questions, and you rate how it was in the past and how it was now, and based on which ones are high, oh, well, either we need to find ways to decrease stress in that area, or to look for internal stressors, which might include lab testing, or to coach up the body's ways to, so you kind of look at it both from okay, well, how could I test for things that could affect my my thyroid? Okay, well, I would want to do an adrenal test, probably a gut test, probably those two as a starting point. And then, and especially if you have that and some other things, you can kind of put a puzzle together. So honestly, how I've done it is I just kind of look and see like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I just look around and say, okay, where have I not focused on, and where are most of my symptoms clustering around, and so, okay, well, let's pick one off. Let's do these two next. And okay, let's apply that the best I can, and then do another round, another 6 to 12 months from now.
Would you, sorry, I just have one other question, then I'm done. After you identify this and then you start the treatment, is it more, okay, let's fix this and then we're done, and then let's just say it's fixed and the thyroid, goes back to normal, but then if sometime later it dips again, like, would you use the same approach? Would you do something different? I'm just curious on how to maintain it once it is corrected, because maybe you have to redo the whole process again, because what if it's something else that's causing it now?
Yeah. I mean, it really goes to a lot of how, we're all individual, and, some people have some of the terminology that my trainer uses, I like, and I don't like everything he does, but one of them was like genetic gaps. So there's another term he uses, like, where everybody has these gaps, these abilities where they're not able to deal with to make up for the difference, metabolic gaps. Anyways, so some of us have inherent weaknesses that we're always going to have to support. So I mean, I have an adrenal system that tires out quickly. So and I have a detoxification system that doesn't work that well. I will likely always have that. So if I have a problem, one of the first things I'm going to go to look for is like, okay, what toxin am I dealing with now? That's a likely place for me. Someone else might have, a carb metabolism thing. Okay, they got to look at, okay, what is messing up my carb system? So learning what are the strong and weak parts of that person, looking for, okay, what have we not looked at that could be affecting, or how could we support? And looking at symptom clusters, like, okay, well, what could that symptom be pointing to? That could point to, well, you might have kidney issues. You might have, I don't know. Have you looked at, so when you do a lot of these tests, they have a lot of things that come out of them. So GI map inflammation comes out of it, gut health, immune, there's a lot of things that if you do some of the core ones, that's what's, and let me go back here, the organic acid is like that. I mean, it points in all different directions. So you kind of get a picture of your internal reality, which you can say like, oh, that's kind of how this person is functioning. And then you can say like, okay, so they have a mitochondrial weakness. Okay, so that's probably going to be something we're going to have to coach up for a while to get back into shape. And so I don't know if that's helpful. That's my understanding.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so just one study that I could find that talked about the H. pylori. It was a small group, but and they had more in the study. This I just found that was quick. They did 5 patients where they had high TPO-AB, which is the Hashimoto's indicator, autoimmune thyroid indicator, and so then they treated for H. pylori, and after so many months, you could see a significant decrease in the thyroid antibody production, and versus the control group, most of them had to increase and only a few had a small decrease. So there's one indicator that that can certainly be a cause. And something like the GI map is a good way to look at that. Okay, so ways to test for H. pylori. If you have Hashimoto's and elevated thyroid antibodies and are signs of autoimmune gastritis, this is from a web page. There's a high possibility that you have an underlying H. pylori infection. You have a few different testing options available for you. There's blood tests, but they don't always differentiate between past and current infections. There's breath tests, which are interesting, but a positive test will only be found in severe cases, so they don't always catch them. Whereas the stool test will catch, the GI map especially, will catch all kinds of different things, and as well as H. pylori. And it can be ordered from any functional medicine practitioner, and I can do it as an FDN as well, but many people can do it. So, and you may be able to do it directly. I think I can do it cheaper. I don't know. Anyways, all right. So I have 15 minutes left. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about how Mark Hyman connects thyroid to the brain and how it affects the brain. And some of his comments that he had on the thyroid, and then we will wind down. He calls it the yellow canary of the body. I have discovered the thyroid gland is the yellow canary of the body. It is sensitive to multiple influences from our diet, our lifestyle, and the environment, all of which influence its function. Then, I did not copy that right. I forgot to delete these things. All right. Okay, subclinical hypothyroidism and depression. The research on how thyroid affects mood, cognitive function is clear. And one study of the elderly subclinical hypothyroidism increased the risk of depression 4 times. Yet many doctors prescribe Prozac before taking a good hard look at the thyroid and treating those who don't have full-blown hypothyroidism. So it's a true statement. And then thyroid dysfunction in the brain. It seems that thyroid hormone is critical for helping the brain make new brain cells, neurogenesis, particularly in the hippocampus, which is responsible for mood and memory. In fact, mood disorders in general, including bipolar disorder, are increased in people with altered thyroid function. I couldn't tell entirely whether the research was sometimes the other direction as well, like depression, which would make sense. Depression is causing the low thyroid. I'm sure there's probably reasons to think both directions. Research shows that low thyroid hormone levels reduce the function of serotonin receptors, which is interesting, which leads to depression. So this is one psychiatrist's slides showing his summary. Psychiatric manifestations of hyperthyroidism: cognitive changes, impaired memory, psychomotor slowing, reduced attention span, and vegetative symptoms: hypersomnia, sleep apnea, fatigue, lethargy, apathy, inertia, low libido, mood symptoms, depression, mood instability, mania, and anxiety. And I guess psychosis in severe cases. That would be very severe. All right, so 6 steps to heal a thyroid. This is from a blog from Dr. Hyman again. Strategy 1, eliminate the causes of thyroid problems. Avoid, and I'm summarizing some of his notes, avoid gluten, fruit allergies, and excessive soy and cruciferous vegetables. I know, I don't remember if I can explain all the reasons why, but I know that certainly does affect hormones and a number of things like that. So excessive soy, as well as excessive gluten, all those wonderful Big Franks and etc. are something to look at, and many other things that we eat as soy. So, and cruciferous foods, although are very good, also can be stressful and can cause problems, and do affect hormones, which evidently includes thyroid, in good and bad ways. Consider possible mercury, excess fluoride, chlorination, or pesticides. We saw some of that. Manage stressors, emotional and physical/internal. One thing that we're trained in FDNs is that physical stressors can often affect the same pathways, including cortisol and all that kind of stuff. When we're looking for managing stressors, we need to look at both emotional, physical, spiritual, and including internal. Strategy 2, regular exercise and saunas. Exercise stimulates the thyroid gland secretion and increases tissue sensitivity to thyroid hormones throughout the body. And saunas help flush toxins. We talked about those. Aids weight loss, provides great stress relief. And detoxification itself can help increase your ability to lose excess weight, which can help with thyroid issues as well. Strategy 3, eat foods that provide nutritional support for your thyroid and avoid those that don't. So we talked a little bit about the foods that can cause problems, so avoiding those. The production of thyroid hormones requires iodine, omega-3 fatty acids, and converting the inactive T4 to active T3 requires selenium, and both the binding of the T3 to the receptor on the nucleus, switching it on require vitamin A and vitamin D as well as zinc. So he regularly recommends fish. There's maybe the small fish. There might be some evidence for having some of that. I don't know what he doesn't recommend the big fish either. So there's some reasons to consider that at times. Thyroid boosting foods are probably better options too, if you can find them. Thyroid boosting foods include seaweed and sea vegetables, which contain iodine. There's tons of people that say the benefits of sea vegetables. Dandelion, mustard, and other dark leafy greens contain vitamin A. Brazil nuts contain selenium. And again, we have that slide, which we walked through all of those before. We have some sea vegetables here, yummy, yummy. And it'd be maybe sometime we could have somebody give us a good recipe for how to incorporate sea vegetables into your diet. That'd be a good takeaway. Smoothie, sushi?
Smoothie and ramen. Those are the easy ones. And sushi, yeah, but yeah. Spirulina.
Smoothie. Okay, spirulina smoothies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sounds yummy. Strategy 4, use supplements that support your thyroid. Key nutrients for healthy thyroid function include a multivitamin and mineral supplement that contains selenium, iodine, zinc, vitamin A, D, omega-3 acids, fats, and tyrosine I've seen mentioned and some supplements. And of course, all of this, you need to double check and research yourself. I am just doing secondary and third research, so please double check everything before applying anything. Strategy number 5, have your thyroid tested. To get a complete picture, a wide range of functions is helpful. Thyroid stimulating hormone, which is normally what they do, and then they just do T4, but free T3 is good because sometimes if you just substitute T4, it doesn't always activate to T3, and some people need T3 supplement as well, which we'll look at. And then TPO, doctors don't always do that. A lot of people, I think it was like 25% or more of females have some degree of high thyroid. If I remember right, I mean, I didn't get a chance to get that stat in, but I know it was high. Thyroid releasing hormone simulation test. 1 Brazilian nut a day keeps a doctor away. There we go. And a lot more, perfect. 24-hour urine test for free T3 can be helpful in hard to diagnose cases. All right. So a physician experienced in ordering these tests and interpreting the results can provide a more comprehensive picture of how your thyroid is functioning. But getting somebody to look at it in a more comprehensive way than just the one test is probably good. Synthroid, a commonly prescribed synthetic form of T4. It's only the inactive form of thyroxine. So for some people that doesn't meet all their needs is what a lot of people find, and they need some T3. I believe there's some other options I don't have on here. The one most common one is Armour Thyroid, which is a prescription drug, evidently, but it's from desiccated porcine, which means pork. But a lot of people take it and have found it helpful, although I found some interesting people saying that it doesn't work as well now as it used to. So I don't know what has changed. But anyways, there's always this debate between those two. And there's more debate about the different options on how to supplement your thyroid. So careful monitoring is essential. Taking too much thyroid hormone or taking it if you don't need it can lead to undesirable side effects, including anxiety, insomnia, palpitations, and over the long term, bone loss. So I hope this has been helpful. There's a really good YouTube with this guy, George Papanoloa, however you say that, Papanoloa, and Mark Hyman, where they're discussing a lot of the different things mentioned here, other stuff. So that is what I have for today, and I'm glad to hear your thoughts. Or yes.
I have a question about hyperthyroidism. I know you focused on hypothyroidism. Is it true that hyperthyroidism eventually, like you'll just basically it'll burn itself out and then you become hypothyroidism? Do you know about that?
Yeah, I may have read that. I haven't researched enough on that. I wanted to do more research on that one. And I certainly know, of course, it's autoimmune as well. And some of the same triggers I've seen repeatedly, some of the same triggers can be considered that we've been talking about. Hyperthyroid is more common, so that gets more emphasis. But there were some things, I can't remember what else I remember researching. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, yeah, that's pretty much what happens. When I was diagnosed with it about, I think 12 years ago, and I chose not to basically do the radioactive iodine, which puts it into hypothyroidism, they told me that it would burn out within 2 to 3 years. But I did do some natural things, and it was able to put me into like a subclinical. I've never overcome it, but I've been able to have it for 12 years now without going into hypothyroidism. But that is what can happen. I know of someone that had hyperthyroidism. She went to a wellness place and they were able to reverse it, but I guess maybe after pregnancy or something she went back into hyper, and then eventually her thyroid burned out and now she has hypothyroidism.
What were the things you found that helped you again? I remember.
So for me, the biggest trigger I really believe was stress. I was in college at the time, and I don't know if you all remember me. I haven't been around for a while.
Yeah. No.
Okay. So remember when I did a little
Mhm.
testimony about myself? I did some very unhealthy things in college, like staying up late for no reason, drinking tons and tons of power drinks, energy drinks, I mean, and just really bad habits. And I think the biggest cause though was the stress. But what I started doing is some herbs. So in particular for hyperthyroidism, it's kind of like the opposite effect. So I use bugleweed, and I kind of use that now. The bugleweed acts just like the methimazole, I think is called, the drug they give you. So it lowers the thyroid activity and thyroid hormones. And then you have motherwort, which is supposed to give like a cardiac effect. So that's going to help lower your heart rate. And then there's another one called lemon balm. That's also supposed to help. I can't remember exactly what it does, but it kind of acts kind of like the bugleweed, and it helps keep you calm. And then there's one more. I can't remember it right now, but yeah, those are the main ones I use. Oh, hawthorn. So hawthorn's really good too because it helps relax the heart. So it kind of works alongside of the motherwort. And so my biggest issue was that I was never consistent with it. But this past year, I had a pretty big health crisis with my thyroid, and I started really being serious about it. And so for about 3 months, I think I stayed consistent with the protocol, and I was able to lower my levels, but I'm still not quite there. I have the Graves autoimmune, so that's what's causing all of the issues. So as soon as I can find the trigger to my autoimmune disorder, then I can start, getting better.
I think you remember you talked about gluten and dairy as being something you looked at.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we can pray God guide you in your journey.
Oh, thank you.
Conclude that in prayer.
Thank you. That was really helpful. It's very in-depth.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no problem. I've done a lot of like research for myself and for some other people. I've actually taken a functional nutrition course. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm looking into revisiting it because I want to help other people with autoimmune diseases, especially.
Okay. All right. So Angie mentioned or reminded me that we want to talk a little bit about the sugar fast. So I can let her talk.
Right, Robin?
You're so excited? Yes.
Yeah.
I think I was excited. When should be? So we'll let Angie talk about. We're possibly thinking about a different date. So.
All right. Well, so Armani, just FYI, should we stop the recording, or I guess we keep it. At our last meeting, you know, it came up that several of us would sure like some peer support in eliminating sugar from our diet, refined sugars, and so we were like, okay, we got to do this. And then I started thinking, I know tons of other people who would love to, you know, do this and know that others are doing it with them too. So I was kind of toying with the idea, well, why don't we just do it division-wide challenge, you know, make it official. And that way I can create, you know, some resources and things like that to support. So the difficulty with that is it takes time and effort on my part, and that's just, you know, that's in short supply. But I don't know how many of you know, but we have a Joy of Eating Club, which is focused on healthy eating, and we have a Facebook group, and we share healthy recipes all the time and different articles and things. And so I was like, well, and so I posted in the club, you know, just a question: how many of you would like to do a month-long challenge on going sugar-free? And I had quite a few people reply on there, yes, I'm ready to do it, let's do it. And then and so I asked, well, okay, what do you think of the month of February? And then they were like, well, that's Valentine's Day, and someone has their anniversary, and this and that and the other thing. And it's like, okay, fine. So how about the month of March? But some of them said, I can't wait that long, I want to do it now. So I compromised. And so now I'm thinking, well, how about February 15 to March 15? Okay, so you get your V day, and then we can jump into some sugar. Yeah, so I am in the process actually of creating an event within the Joy of Eating Club for those dates. And so it's I wanted to ask actually you guys, how, you know, this doesn't have to be formal, this doesn't have to be fancy, but we want it to be helpful and we want it to be encouraging. So, you know, would there be interest in being part of this Facebook group, you know, and just kind of sharing your journeys and, you know, how am I doing? And, you know, even the good days and the bad days, just encourage each other. And, you know, I think it would be neat at the end if people are able to share, you know, a testimony of, you know, what did you notice that was beneficial in your life? And so maybe it can just be an ongoing encouragement for a lot of people. So just kind of an open question, you know, I've also thought, I know a lot of dietitians who would love to do like a webinar or something, you know, so we could talk about sugar, we could talk about sugar substitutes, we could talk about, you know, there are healthy alternatives to the refined sugars, you know, so we could do these short little informational sessions as well. And so make it a learning experience as well as sort of this journey. So anyway, just what are your thoughts?
That's great. Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
Let's do it. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. How did the date sound? February 15th?
Yes, that works.
Okay.
The only thing for me, I haven't scheduled it yet, but I'm supposed to have an exam on March 11th. So after March 11th, I may cheat a little bit, just saying right now, so you guys, you know. I may end it a little sooner.
And that's fine, you know, and I was actually talking to my best friend who saw my post in the Joy of Eating Club, and she's like, I mean, what's up with that? Do we really need to give up sugar and all of this? And so I was like, it's just for a month. It's just for people who choose. I'm not forcing anyone, and everyone gets to choose their level of participation. We want to encourage to push yourself, but definitely everybody's got their situations that they need to handle. And the goal here, and actually I wrote this down, I would say the goal of this entire thing would be for each of us to make a conscious decision every day to reduce or eliminate intake of refined sugars. So my thing is dead. Oh, yeah. So it's really, everyone sets their goal, their personal goal, but overall the group goal would be to support each other in achieving whatever each individual wants to achieve for that month. Sounds good? Okay, I'm getting, yes, okay.
Please remind
right.
us as we're getting to it. We may forget.
Yep. I'll be putting out advertising and things like that, but yes, we'll definitely send it to the group here as well. I've basically got the event set up on the Joy of Eating Club already, so it's ready to launch. I just wanted to see if, I don't want to make up something that, nobody really wants to do. So
I think that's a great idea to get other people involved. So many of us have that. And honestly, sugar, it's legit a drug. This is like, we need support.
yeah, we do. You know what would be neat?
What?
How many of you have read the book Fat Sugar, Salt, Fat, Sugar?
I haven't.
No? Oh, it's an old book. I have a copy right here. I have it right here. Maybe I don't have it here. I think I have it at the office. But it's a book, one of those investigational books, not a scientific book, but and they look at how the food industry promotes us in eating salty, fatty, and sugary foods, and how that has become, part of their formulation. So, we could do like a book club, everybody read that book together during the month or something like that. So just as an added bonus. So, okay, awesome. Well, I'll get it set up, and then I'll send the link to Jonathan, and so everybody can join. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think I love where this group is going, and thank you very much for your participation. And I think next week